You know, when you hear the word monopoly, you probably think of a single company that owns an entire market. But how powerful is that company really? It's not just about being the only game in town. Today, we're going to break down how economists actually put a number on a monopoly's power. So let's jump right in.
Seriously, think about this for a second. If you want a burger, you've got a ton of choices, right? McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, not to mention all the local spots. But when you want to flip on a light switch, you've probably got exactly one option. This one simple question gets right to the heart of what market power is, and by the end of this, you'll know exactly why this is the case.
Okay, so before we can even start measuring a monopoly, we have to get our heads around the single most important idea behind its power. And that idea is elasticity. This is the secret ingredient that determines just how much a company can get away with charging you.
So what is it exactly? Well, price elasticity of demand is really just a fancy way of asking, how much do you change your buying habits when a price changes? Are you super sensitive to even a small price hike, or will you pretty much buy it no matter what? That's what elasticity tells us.
Here's the best way to think about it. Picture elastic demand, like a brand new, super stretchy rubber band. Even a small pull, a little price increase, causes a huge stretch in how much people buy. They just stop buying it. But inelastic demand, that's like a stiff, old rubber band. You can pull on it really hard, jack up the price a lot, and it barely stretches. People's buying habits just don't change all that much.
So what makes something stretchy or stiff in the first place? Well, a few things are at play. Are there other options, substitutes? Is it something you absolutely need, like medicine, or is it a luxury, like a fancy sports car? How long do you have to find an alternative? And hey, how much of your paycheck are we even talking about here? All these things shape a product's elasticity.
But if you boil all of those factors down, one of them stands head and shoulders above the rest: the availability of substitutes. It's simple, really. The more choices you have, the more power you have. The fewer choices, the more power the seller has over you.
And this brings us right back to our burgers. It's the perfect example. If McDonald's decides to raise the price of a Big Mac, what do? You can literally just walk across the street and buy a Whopper. Because you have so many substitutes, the demand for any one particular burger is super elastic.
All right, so now that we've got a good handle on elasticity, let's get to the really cool part: how economists use this idea to build an actual formula for measuring market power.
To do this, economists use something called the learner index. It's a really simple but totally powerful concept. It says a firm's market power can be measured by how much it can mark up its price over its marginal cost, which is just the cost of making one more of whatever they're selling.
And the formula looks just like this. L, for the learner index, is the price minus the marginal cost, and you divide all that by the price. For a company in a perfectly competitive market, like a wheat farmer, this number is basically zero, because their price is their cost. But for a monopolist, that number is going to be way, way bigger than zero. But wait, how does a firm even know how big of a markup it can get away with? This is where it all clicks together. The learner index is actually mathematically the same thing as the negative inverse of the price elasticity of demand, or ED. This is the magic link. A company's power isn't just some random thing. It is a direct result of our lack of choices.
This table just makes that relationship crystal clear. Take a look at the top row. When elasticity is high, let's say -4, it means we consumers are really responsive to price changes. The result? Market power, the learner index, is low, just 0.25. Now look at the bottom row. When elasticity is low, getting close to -1, consumers are basically trapped. We're not responsive, and so market power just skyrockets to 0.91.
So we've established that low elasticity is the key to all this. But what causes that low elasticity in the first place? Let's zoom out a bit and look at the three main sources of market power. First, as we've been saying, it's the elasticity of demand itself. Fewer substitutes equals more power. Simple. Second, and this is pretty obvious, it's the number of firms in the market. The fewer competitors there are, the bigger the slice of the pie for the ones that are left. And third, it's about how those companies interact. I mean, if they compete like crazy, power stays low. But if they quietly agree not to compete or even collude, they can basically act like one giant monopoly.
Now, all this market power isn't just some abstract number on a spreadsheet. It has very real consequences. It creates winners and losers, and economists can actually measure the exact cost to all of us.
When you get right down to it, the conflict is pretty simple.
The higher prices and lower production that a monopoly causes, well, that's fantastic for the company's bottom line. But that extra profit comes directly out of the consumer's pocket.
Let's put some real numbers on this, using a classic textbook example. Because of the monopolist's higher price, consumers as a whole group are worse off by $384.50. That is real wealth being transferred away from them.
But, and this is so important to understand, the monopolist doesn't actually get all of that money. Their extra profit only goes up by $219.50. So, wait a minute. If consumers lost over $380, but the company only gained about $220, where did the rest of that money go?
That missing $165, that is what economists call deadweight loss. It represents all the buying and selling that would have happened in a normal competitive market, but didn't because the monopoly's price was too high. It's economic value that just, poof, vanishes. It benefits absolutely no one. It's a pure net loss to society.
Okay, so after hearing all of that, it seems pretty obvious that monopolies are always the bad guy, right? Well, not always. There's this fascinating exception where a monopoly is actually the most efficient way to set up a market.
It's called a natural monopoly, and it happens in industries where the upfront costs are just astronomical. Think about the cost of building an entire electricity grid for a city, or laying down all the water pipes. In cases like these, it's actually cheaper and more efficient for one single company to serve everybody.
And this gets to the core problem. We're always taught that competition is good, that it always lowers prices. But what if, in some very specific cases, adding a competitor would actually make everything more expensive and maybe even bankrupt both companies, leaving everyone with nothing?
Let's break this down. Step 1. A single electric company builds the grid. It can serve all the customers and spread out those enormous fixed costs, enough to turn a profit. Okay, makes sense. Step 2. But now imagine a second company comes in and builds a whole parallel grid. Now the customer base is cut in half. Suddenly, neither company can sell enough electricity to cover its massive costs, and they both go out of business. So what's the fix? Step 3. Society agrees to allow one firm to exist, the natural monopoly. But in return, the government steps in to regulate the price they can charge, making sure they don't abuse that power.
And this all leads us to one last really big question for today. The classic natural monopolies were all about physical things, pipes and wires. But what about digital infrastructure? You know, the network effect, where a platform like a social network gets more valuable the more people use it. Does that create a new kind of natural monopoly for today's tech giants? It's the same economic ideas we've been talking about, just applied to a whole new world. Something to think about the next time you're choosing between a burger and your one and only internet provider.